It's a pleasure to meet you, but my name's not that important. All I am is a man that's lived way too long. The how, though, that's what's more important. I left my home a long time ago to chase after my big adventure. I mean, I guess every kid wants to leave their nest and explore the world, right? But I wanted to explore it all. That's the difference. Of course, I'm sitting here now, so I guess I got what I wanted. I mean, all I knew about the world at the time were just from the stories that all the sailors brought back from sea. They just all sounded so exciting, I couldn't help but try it for myself. So what did I do? I got me one of them boats as soon as I could. I must have sailed half the world in just a few years. Of course, like any sailor, I spent most of my time on land in the finest of establishments. I drank, gambled, and made friends with some of the most interesting people this world had to offer. And for years, I just repeated that process. I drank, I gambled, I explored, drank, gambled, explored. Somewhere on the coast of Spain, or maybe it was France, I don't know. Borders were a little bit different back then, but the where isn't important now anyways. I saw this woman at one of the tables, and I just stopped in my tracks. Not because it was a woman in a parlor or anything like that, but because this one was different. And I just couldn't help but approach. I won't waste your time talking about how beautiful she was or anything like that, but she was something to see. She just felt different, and there was something off about her, and I loved it. And by the looks of it, it seemed she knew her way around the card table, so that was just a bonus. But don't forget, there was something off, and that's what's important here. So we talked and we played, and she said her name was Eve, and turns out she was a bit of a wanderer too. As for the game, I won a few hands, she won a few hands, and it was a constant give and take, but I don't think either of us really cared that much. And to make a long story shorter, one thing led to another, and at sunrise we got ourselves a room upstairs. And things were great. We spent a few days there, but eventually I think we both got a little anxious sitting still. And after all, the world and its seas were meant to be explored, right? So on our last day together, we didn't go back up to our regular room in the morning, and we didn't need to talk about it either. It was just something we both knew what was happening. At some point, the conversation just stopped, and we stared at each other. And I finally broke the silence, and I said what I wanted to say. I told her, "Come with me." But she said, "I can't." And naturally, I was heartbroken. I tried to convince her to reconsider, and I tried and tried because I didn't want that small sense of loneliness anymore. But she still gave me, "I can't." But when I asked why is when things got even more interesting. Remember how I said there was something off about her? Well, here's where that comes into play. She told me, she said, "I'd love nothing more than to travel the world with you, but I'm afraid I've lived a life too long." Now, keep in mind, I never bothered to ask her age, but there couldn't have been more than a 3-year age gap between us by the looks of it, so naturally I was a bit confused. And she sighed and she told me, "I've lived so many years and seen so much of this world, but I'm tired now, and I know now you can never truly see everything." I said, "Oh, but you can," being the optimistic adventurer I was. She said, "You can't. Believe me." And I still couldn't quite figure out what she was going on about, and I must have had the blankest look of confusion on my face, but she continued talking, and she said, "Long time ago, I gambled with another wandering stranger, and he made me this bet. Said, if you best me, you will live forever, and you'll be able to see everything in this whole wide world. Easy as that." And despite my disbelief, I couldn't help but take his bet. It sounded far too enticing if it were actually true. And I won, so here I am, about 4 lifetimes later. And I scoffed, and I think I even laughed at her a little, but I let her speak. And she said, "Well, whether you believe me or not, I want to make the same bet to you. And as I've said before, I'm very tired, and my desire for adventure isn't what it used to be. But of all the men I've known, I've never met one with your energy to discover, so I see no better choice for the gifts and burdens of infinite lifetimes. If you best me, you will live forever." And of course, I took a few seconds to process everything she had told me, and I asked, You're right. I'm having a very hard time believing that one. However, in my experience, every bet involves a stake from both parties, so what's the catch here? She told me. She said, well, I asked him the very same thing, but to my surprise, he asked for nothing from me. He simply said that one's life is controlled entirely by chance, or fate if you choose to believe in it. So why should the question of multiple lifetimes be left to anything else? I guess he was just tired too. So, again, I took a second to process everything, and I told her. I said, all right, I suppose it would be too enticing to turn down if you are telling the truth. So the cards were dealt, and the last card was flipped, and it turned out I had the higher card. And she looked at me with the widest smile, and I could just see an overwhelming sense of relief come over her. And it was in that exact moment I started believing her crazy story, as weird as it was. I mean, I just never seen such genuine happiness in my life. And the conversation was quiet again for a little bit, and we both just sat there staring at the card on the table. It was the King of Hearts, if I remember correctly. And to this day, I couldn't tell you who was more in shock. I mean, if she were telling me the truth, the thought of life forever seemed a bit daunting to me, but exciting nonetheless. And eventually we stood up and we left the table. I was a bit choked up, but I managed to ask her. I asked, so what comes next? She said, for me, nothing but well-needed rest, but for you, the possibilities are endless, and I'm truly excited for you. And I said, well, I suppose you're right, but will I ever see you again? And she said, not anytime soon, but maybe someday when you're tired too, we'll meet again. And she was right. She walked out that door, and I never saw her again, even with all this time I've walked the earth. The time went on, and I lived my life just as I had before I met Eve. I continued my regular port hopping, I kept learning, I kept discovering. Only difference was, I no longer felt anxious when I wasn't out sailing somewhere or discovering something new. I could finally sit still without worrying I was missing something. And I just tried so many new things I would have never went out of my way to do before. Like books. I've read so many books. It's just funny how it takes living forever to let yourself slow down sometimes. But, of course, there's some bad parts of living forever, too. You know, I was never close to my family, but knowing that everyone you might have known once are long gone and you're still around can weigh a bit heavy on the heart sometimes. I mean, people die, you live. New people are born, they die, you live. And anyone you become attached to dies eventually, but you live. But you keep learning to move forward when you live forever. So here I am, a few hundred years older than I was when I won that bet, or something like that. I don't know. Time becomes a little less important when you have infinite amounts of it. And Eve was right. You can't possibly see everything there is to see. Trust me, I've tried. But I've done so much, and I would have never had the chance to do it if I hadn't met her. I just wish I had the chance to thank her for that. Infinite lifetimes is undoubtedly a burden, but I found it to be an even larger gift. And just like Eve and the man before her, I'm just tired now. And in all my life, I could never figure out why those two would give up adventure and give up living forever, but sitting here now, I think it makes sense. And like I said, there's just so much to find and so much to learn about the world. It would just be selfish of me not to pass that privilege on to someone else, right? So, without wasting any more of your time, because I know you've got places to be and things to do, you ready to take that bet?